Can you see the recording button? We will see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So shall we roll?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hi, Gayatri. Thanks for making time to chat with me today. Let me do a quick introduction of why we're here. I'm Aparna. I'm with Edge Networks, an AI-based talent management company. And Gayatri is the chairperson at LabourNet Services. She was the CEO for over 13 years prior to becoming chairperson. She has won many awards, the most recent being Forbes India Entrepreneur with Social Impact Award. And personally, Gayatri and I go way back. We were classmates while doing our masters in social work in Bombay and also roommates. I'm truly excited to be chatting with you today. But before we go further, would you tell us a little bit of what LabourNet does and your role specifically over there, Gayatri?
So LabourNet is basically, it's a group of entities at this point of time. We have it's an umbrella term for 3 organizations that we work with. From an issue perspective, our goal is to see that people's incomes go up. If you just break it down to a very simple mission statement. So we are hoping that through our efforts, from about 200 rupees per day, people are able to move to about 2,000 rupees per day. That's really the goal that we have. Now, 200 is an assumption that anybody who's freshly skilled and is coming into the labor market is at 200, and then it goes upwards. So that's the category that we're working with. We're about 13, 14 years old now. And so our goal is to through our multiple sets of interventions move towards employment and wage recognition. So which means that we have a gig platform, we have a payroll, and we have skilling. All 3 function together, and of course we are a social enterprise, and therefore we have taking community together is very important for us.
Okay, so actually then this is actually basically one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you. Now, I don't know whether you know, but Edge works in the talent management space. And for us, the reason we got into this, because we believe that the power of any organization is its people. It's the skills, their competencies, and the experience. Now, when organizations put their talent at the center of business decisions, the organization will see better productivity, retention of its people, and therefore better revenues and bottom lines. So we believe that to meet this objective, one needs to organize, optimize, and simplify decisions around this talent. And Edge is in that business. We're in the business of simplifying these talent decisions through our products, which is powered by the AI-based Edge Knowledge Graph. So we wanted to talk to you to get your perspective on the skilling and upskilling of the unorganized sector. See, we hear a lot of stories around the organized sector, what happened during the pandemic, remote working, remote living, but how did it affect the informal sector, their working conditions, especially the migrant workers? We'd like to hear from you on that.
So, as has been very well documented, they fell off the wagon, completely. So there was, and I'm going to restrict my comments to 2 sectors because that's the sectors we were active in. We work a lot in the construction sector and particularly on the highways. And they were just left with no recourse. So they neither belonged to the place. So there was an identity issue. Transport they lost, and they were trying to figure out how to move. In my opinion, even today there is a major problem because transport has not returned to its normal. So for example, if workers have to come from Odisha or Bihar or Jharkhand, or West Bengal for that matter, there are no buses. So the trains are very limited. So you still have to buy tickets in Tatkal. So earlier what you would have spent as about 400 rupees to come to Bangalore from, let's say, Behrampur. Today you'll probably have to spend about 1,600 because you're buying Tatkal ticket.
Wow, 4 times.
Yeah, and this is far better. Till about December, we were running buses. Every week, buses to Delhi and Bangalore and Chennai, because workers had to come back and they were desperate to come back. Right? There's work back home, but at the same time, to reach the city was costing about 4,000 rupees. So I think the problem with the sector is that, and here it's not referring only to construction, I'm sort of widening it. So like manufacturing has a lot of migrant workers. All industrial estates practically live on migrant workers. So if you look at the two chunks of the economy, construction and manufacturing, both are dependent on migrant workers to the tune of about probably 80-85%. And here, frankly speaking, none of the platforms have worked because access to them itself is an issue. Data is available with multiple sets of people. Data does not translate into actual accessibility to the person. The entire sector, which is sort of fueling manufacturing and construction, and I guess even loaders, hamalis, these groups are still contractor driven. Labor contractors bring them. So I don't think the systems have yet matured to understand that ecosystem of work. So the technology systems are still standing outside there. To me, the place where the technology systems broke that, in a sense, camel's back is in the driver segment. The Ola and the Uber actually broke that whole, because you had taxi stands, you had people who owned taxis who gave it to companies. So there were multiple business models around those, but technology came and transformed the way in which you can reach a driver. I haven't seen it in any other sector yet where that kind of democratization has happened because of technology.
Okay. So, but do you see post the pandemic, do you think there's been anything done in terms of upskilling, Gayatri, by the government or the private sector? Were there any initiatives taken by the tech companies to bridge the skilling gap?
See, tech companies, it's very tough. This is, core skill. I mean, okay, let's take a couple of roles and then talk about it, right? So assume it's a welder role. How would a tech company even approach it? The only way you have is simulation. And there are simulators, right? There are welder simulators which are there. Now, welding machine simulators, I'm sorry. So when you look at the simulators, these are good if you can access them. So you need to then be in a classroom kind of situation to access simulators. There are auto simulators. So if I was a driver, for example, I'm a heavy equipment driver. Like we have a center we run in Mumbai in partnership with Total, where it is a very high-end simulator-led lab. Now you have to bring in truck drivers. Even if it is a 2-hour, 3-hour simulator-driven, upskilling which has to happen. When centers are closed, then for hard skills, it becomes very difficult to upskill. So what you can do is on-site. When you do on-site, again, you need to congregate people into a location. So I think the whole vocational skills is going to take a different modality. According to me, what has to happen is you need to aggregate workspaces. So like Oyo did an aggregation of rooms, or what is this other company? Airbnb. Airbnb and Oyo, what they did was aggregated rooms. That means your house and my house became available to the people, right? On a similar scale, every workspace needs to get aggregated. So if it gets aggregated as places for training, then what will happen is you will have this upskilling and reskilling on scale. Today, government has done some efforts, but in my opinion, it cannot be on the scale that is required, because unless this business model comes in, it's tough. Today, when you're talking of upskilling, you're talking of digital upskilling, financial literacy upskilling, communication upskilling, which is all little parts of it, but you need a transformatory technology for this.
So where do you see, how do we bridge this gap then? Because see, you see a lot of the youth from the unorganized sector wanting to get into this financial upskilling or the technology upskilling. The government says it wants to do it. So how does the private and the public sector, how do we come together to bridge that gap? How does one do that? Because it has to be possible at some level. And I know we have to keep in mind that internet penetration is low in a lot of these, in a lot of areas. So in your point of view, at some level, can policies be brought into place? What does one do?
So let's just separate the two, right? The one I was talking about was for the sectors which are hard sectors.
Yes.
Which means hard skills have to be given. We have to figure out, can we aggregate workspaces, and therefore it is. And in my mind there, it's not a technology problem as much as a business model problem, right? Somebody should see value along the way. Somebody saw value in OYO and Airbnb, and therefore the business model really worked. So technology is available. If aggregation of rooms is possible, I'm sure aggregation of workspaces is possible. Aggregation of playgrounds is happening, right? These are possible to do, but you need to find out how the business model is going to work. Now let's look at what you said, that is youth. Now youth, you have to divide into two categories, right? School going and those who have joined colleges, maybe tier 2, tier 3 colleges.
Yeah.
Let's look at that segment, both in urban cities as well as rural. Now here there are several elements. It's not merely a public-private partnership. Once the school education is poor, so your confidence is built over a period of 12 years. So now when you start bringing it as capsules which are small, it takes time for communication. And I'll give you a different organization, but very recently I met them, called Swada. They take very small numbers, 20, 30 candidates who are from Anantapur, which is a district which neighbors Bangalore neighboring.
Yeah.
So if you look at Anantapur, they've taken some 27 or 32 youth who have joined BTech, BPharm, BCom, BSc, Life Sciences, etc. Now, after years of support and mentorship, they are still not sure of their communication. So therefore, it needs to be something which we provide at scale and consistently for a long period of time. Today, what happens in digital literacy is it is a tick mark. I get a certification which is a 20 hours, 15 hours, etc. What you need is consistent long-term impact for soft skills to improve. Analytical skills, digital skills is literacy and mathematics. Financial is mathematics and literacy. So you need to build it over a period of time. I think today everyone is interested in a very short-term quick win. And that may not really give you the results. It will give you awareness. Awareness will be created, but for long-term impact, I think you need longer-term consistent interventions.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely on the schooling, everything, but what I see is that a lot of the youth, even when they get into, say, the entry-level positions in, say, retail or healthcare, what is it? And digital transformation is being used as one of the important pivots, especially right now. How do we track that? How do we bridge that skilling gap to retain those people? Because otherwise they'll fall back, into the same cycle again and again. Now I know that there've been lots of policies to keep them going, in the sector, but you see tech companies playing a part in that, keep them bridging that gap or not, especially in the IT and telecom sector?
So let's take the telecom sector, okay? Now telecom sector, let's break the roles up. Now one is your, those who sell your SMS cards, who upgrade your SMS cards, right?
Yeah.
And then you have those who fix your lines. For example, your Indus Tower kind of backend, which is to bring the wires and whatever, the larger fiber optics, etc. there. One is a skilled and the other is, is more a sales job.
Mm.
Now, and I'm just reducing the telecom into two very entry level large scale, which is not correct, but just for ease of for argument's sake, I'm simplifying it. So if you look at it here from the sales perspective, I think there's a lot of technology which has been deployed. And that's how you have every Kirana shop which is literally selling mobile SIM cards. So in there, I'm not seeing such a big. There will be opportunities for optimization, but today technology is what has facilitated that. Now, if you look at roles which were at the back end, they all ran call centers or very large. This will completely disappear because your chatbots have come. With ML coming in. Tell me one thing: whether your Airtel phone is or Jio phone is not working, you can actually do an entire chat on your problems using a chatbot, right? So there will be a transformation, and therefore roles will become redundant there. Sales role will remain. Redundancy will happen in back-end roles. The other role, which I said, the technical role, will remain, and that has the same problem as welding. You need a physical body there, and physical upskilling is needed. So telecom, I would say, is this telecom billing will get technology companies have a huge role. Already there is enormous automation happening there. And those automation will just ensure, actually it will result in job loss and technology coming in. But these are job losses which I feel are not bad job losses to happen, because it will result in job loss, it will result in change there. It's not necessarily a negative. It results in more productive interfaces.
And then reskilling of people in more productive roles.
Now, IT, if you look at, is a lot more complex. Now, I'm not talking IT companies, that's a different ballgame. I'm talking of IT as a user. So, for example, government is one of the largest MIS, cooking platforms. They have so many, just so many data sets that they're dealing with, and everybody inputs this data. School, food, and your department which does your public distribution system, to your Anganwadis, to your healthcare. Everybody is is collecting data. Now here you have a role which became almost how should I say, institutionalized. In every office you will find one young person who does the computer. So replace the typist with this young person. Now this must be, I don't know what the statistics are, it must be lakhs. Now here I think Google Maps will change the way in which we are going to look at data. So maps are going to be and I was reading recently that government is looking at creating its own map systems, if that happens, it's going to transform the way in which we store data itself. Now it's going to become more visual. It's going to become more topical. That means per pin code, you'll be able to see how many people are there in school, outside school, in ITIs, in colleges, in degree colleges, etc., etc. And I mean, I'm talking the education framework, but if you look at healthcare, you'll have a similar. So you may actually, I think the next decade may actually see us thinking of data very differently. And then as far as again in the IT, if you look at it, all those who are handling complaints, your BSNL, what BESCOM, etc. in Karnataka, if you look at the electricity, you call a 1912 and they pick up the phone and say, I'll come back to you, may all get automated.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that piece I agree with. Now, another part is I want to ask you is, there are rumors of a second wave setting in. Do you think we'll be better prepared to handle, say, another potential lockdown, and what will happen with our workforce in the unorganized sector? considering you know what happened in the last 9 months for us, do you think we'll be able to at least preempt what can be done if there is a second wave?
I think there'll be a second wave, but I don't think there'll be a lockdown. There may be, regional, small level containment zones, but I don't think we'll go in for the kind of lockdown that we went in for.
Yeah, sure. I'm not saying no, but again, the people who will get affected it'll be the migrant workers, the construction side.
There's been any change. I don't think there's been any change whatsoever.
No?
Because our work practices, okay, let me put it this way, okay? Let's look at transportation. The poor have to transfer themselves from location one to the other using either a train or a bus or a shared vehicle, right?
Shared vehicle, yeah.
These are only three. All three is a problem today. The number of vehicles on the road are less, whichever form you want to take. Shared, public transport, private bus or train. All three are less. Therefore, they have no choice but to crowd into one place. The living arrangements that we have, I forget the statistics, but assume 30% of our population lives in urban areas. Right from a tehsil headquarter to a metro city. What's changed in living arrangements? What's changed in the way in which a market looks like? You may have sanitization in a mall, but tell me, how does it look like in a vegetable market or in a wholesale market? Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed, yeah.
So then I think the coronavirus is not at fault. It's told us, wake up, guys. And we are like, okay, listen, I saw you once. I'm frightened, but not terrified. Come back again and we'll see. Sometime I'll change. So I think it was a good nightmare, but we came out of the nightmare quite saying we can go back to our normal style of life. No problem. So, according to me, we didn't learn. Second, did we learn empathy? I very much doubt it. So they were the poor. They serviced us. We were inconvenienced. Felt a little bad. We did the best we could by our domestic workers, paid them for a few months. Were very satisfied that we paid them for the months they did not work. And we have gone back to our usual style. Possibly there's a 1% or maybe, if I'm optimistic, 10% of the middle class who now feels I need to do something. So the self-actualization probably will drive higher. So maybe employee volunteering and these kind of stuff may really, I feel, may have a positive impact. At least it's hurt our psyche, right? When your psyche is hurt, I feel there could be some changes. But in your business, everyday life, did we make a change? Not sure.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, I'm going to move to a slightly different topic. In the terms of the role of human resources, how do you think they navigated around these complex situations in the social enterprise area? What do you think the issues were?
So first, before we go to social enterprise, let's look at the overall, right? There's been a lot of conversation on the gig economy. And especially with the logistics and the e-commerce and new age companies coming in. There's been a lot of, on two elements, right? On the gig, the policies around the gig workforce, the policies around the labor court. These are the two where there has been enormous amount of, there has been a policy change and there has been discussions around it. For me, I feel that for the gig workforce, it's the best thing which has happened. Because I feel earlier they were not even, we were not even talking about it. At least now it's on the dining table, right? You brought them right to the center of the stage. Earlier, what we discussed is why were their wages are not, nobody's earned monthly wages in India. 80% haven't earned in the last 70 years or 100 years, whatever you want to take as the time frame, irrespective. Now, in that case, so first time you're talking of per hour wage, per task wage, productivity, etc. That means you're talking of measurements there. So to me, it's the best thing which has happened. Then there is a conversation around social security there. So, if you can't do PF and ESI, what will work? Because everybody says that cash in hand is what workers want, which is true. Workers don't want to, put it ahead for 60 years hence what's going to happen to me. A 20-year-old wants to know, I'm going to get 10,000 now or 13,000 now, or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
So from that perspective, I think for the first time, the conversations on gig, while it is very controversial, will result in policies for the poor. For the first time, I think that will happen. As far as the labor court is concerned, it's a lot more complex, right? It will change the way in which full-time workers were working. But for this group of workers, I'm not sure it will make so much of a change. Now, the opportunity we have is actually an upskilling opportunity, Aparna. So now if it becomes a 4-day work and you actually have 1 or 2 days available, and you can say 2 days can be upskilling opportunity for the informal sector.
Correct.
And given the volume of education institutions we have, sometimes it's shocking, right? I mean, if you drive Chennai to Bangalore, you practically feel you've seen buildings and buildings and buildings there. Now if you're able to harness this through a combination of digital and physical infrastructure aggregation, then you will actually have a skilled manpower. Today, you do have a situation where we have doers. We don't have. I had a very interesting conversation once with a multinational company head. He said, if I needed a mold made, I would go to China. If I had to have the production done, I would come to India. But if I wanted quality production and mold, I would go to China. So I have no, I'm not anti-China or pro-China or pro-India, none of those things, but I'm just saying, which means our analytical capacity of the people that we have educated is poor. Design capabilities are poor. Logical thinking capabilities are poor. So assume that everybody, 12 million workers coming into the workforce every year, and assume just about 2 million of them are clearing between 12th standard and graduation. This group of them, imagine you're able to transform with a 4-day week with 2 days for
skilling and education.
Yeah, so upskilling, reskilling, skilling, etc. I think you have enormous transformatory possibility for a group which is not at all there.
So have you seen any companies do this? Have you seen any companies take up this initiative? At least
in a small way, there was a program called NEEM, which the Ministry of Higher Education ran. Now the problem was NEEM was often seen as a company's escape route to not pay PF and ESI. So I think therefore it did not really see the light of the day. See, conceptually it is right, but the way it got practice is just don't pay PF and ESI. So it became a escape route. So instead of doing that, if you actually went into the ethos of apprenticeship or what this is called, national employability, NEEM is, I forget the full form, mission, then I think we have something to go for.
Okay.
And there are companies which have tried it. I know St. Gobain's had a group of 30 people it tried with. NTTF in Bangalore, in a traditional manner, has tried it. We have a couple of NEEM candidates, not couple, whatever, in sort of double-digit, triple-digit numbers, small, but there. So I think these are places where we need to really think. And I'm again saying, educational institutions aren't about fancy buildings. Educational institutions today, what have we learned, right? There's a digital infrastructure and there's a physical infrastructure. Both are important in skilling. So I think, how do you harness digital and physical in a manner in which you're able to get a more productive workforce is where we have to get to.
So what I'm understanding is, because my question was, what do you see the role of human resources playing here, whether it's social enterprise or otherwise? You're saying this is where they can play a great role in bridging that
gap. Your classic hybrid learning.
Yeah.
What is hybrid learning? You're going to have a certain amount of virtual classroom, self-learning, and face-to-face. Now you break this up saying where is on-job training? Many trades are experiential. Why go manufacturing, right? I mean, or let's take a beautician. A beautician is never certified once. He or she gets multiple certifications, right? If you have to be a very good hairstylist, you probably need a combination of experience and expertise. So how do you do reskilling on a consistent basis? Now, we don't think of beautician often in the context of technology. Right? We think technology is to ease the life of learning of a beautician. If suppose we bring that as the mission statement for us, in that case, we'll really be worried about how they learn. For example, the kinds of simulation which are available on your phone or laptop is also pretty good.
Yeah.
So we need to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and today with the online learning, even a beautician's course can be offered online, whether it's Udemy or Coursera or whatever. Today,
you can offer the course, but you need an expertise, right? How do you develop, which is a hands-on? Tell me, you don't want a beautician who's completely certified online. Would you allow her to cut your hair?
No. So then but that's the case with any job I see, and you can learn something online or offline, but unless you get the experience, nobody is going to take you on.
And so that's where aggregation comes in.
Whether it's a CEO or a beautician, I think that's the case.
Aparna is coming from a different perspective. Where I'm coming from is the opportunity you have is for the offline ones that you have, right? The practical ones also for frequent assessment to be done.
Yeah.
Today you have, for example, video-based assessments. You have ML platforms in HR which do your assisted. They're able to look at your face profile and come up. You do word recognition. So that's where HR needs to come in from its technology perspective, both from product companies and that's what I meant. I wasn't saying that you can't practice because you learn online. That's not what I meant. What I meant is these areas still are open for HR to explore. It hasn't really got there.
Okay. So again, I'm coming back to this.
I'm also part of the Beauty SSC, Beauty Sector Skill Council as a governing body member.
Okay.
And the reason I was making that statement is when I'm listening into it, it is one body which is very, very focused on certification. Unlike others, because for them it's bread and butter. Like for example, other industries are not as focused on certification as the beauty and wellness industry. Very, 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 almost militant on its need for certification. Therefore, this industry is very amenable for you to bring in huge transformatory technology. And HR needs to come in there.
Okay. So again, I'm leading on from what you said now about HR. How do you see technology firms like ours, where we do simplifying talent decisions, reskilling, upskilling, retaining of talent, playing a part in bridging this gap?
See, first and foremost, I think you need to distinguish, right? The places entry level, I think, is beyond a point is tough. Because of the economics around it more than anything else. So like, for example, if you were to look at recruitment, scale recruitment. So it's a cost optimization. You need to bring the cost down, have maximum number of candidates available is what is required from a recruitment, right? Now, manufacturing and construction, retail, also logistics will need hundreds of workers.
Yeah, and today healthcare also.
And these need to be filled in a 48-hour time frame.
Yeah.
They can't stop, right? So here databases have proved to be quite useless because the validity of the database is what is important. Now here, therefore, the companies have to think in terms of why should a person be active in the database? So assuming let's take the logistics delivery person, a Swiggy person, right? Now that means I'm a human being. I need to be available in multiple databases for me to get picked up. For the end customer, it is, are you going to deliver in half an hour, or are you going to deliver in 15 minutes or in 4 hours? How fast is that turnaround time going to be, right? So the people selection is going to be the biggest issue here. Now, as far as reskilling here you're talking of primarily customer relations, right? Be polite, be nice, don't be rude. Here, these can be modularized and provided, I think, fairly easily, provided somebody finds value in it. Either the person has to find value, which is your ideal situation, or the company has to find value. And again, here it's going to be a cost optimization, because you need to bring your cost of delivery lower. So I think that's where I would see roles which require little more assimilation. Like, for example, let's take a teller role or a cashier role. With things going online, a lot of it will become redundant. But physical shops, I don't think will ever completely go away.
Yeah.
Here you may require, you have the opportunity for longer term reskilling opportunities. For the person to be multi-skilled, for the person to move from one role, career progression, etc. So I think we should break career progression as to who requires it and who doesn't, right? And I'm going to make the statement, and I could be completely wrong. I don't think Domino's needs career progression. Why do you need career progression for a person who's selling, doing whatever the front elements in Domino's Pizza? They need to have kids coming in. Look at the American model, right? Where it originated. College kids man every McDonald's and Domino's outlet. Which is the same which is happening here. So you're not looking at this person becoming manager, managerial, managing a city, etc. So out of 10,000, probably about 100 will move there, but the remaining 9,900 will move into other professions over time.
Correct.
So I think where upskilling and reskilling will have value is where there is a career progression. So we need to narrow down wherever there's career progression, then these become very important. Where a person is going in with the idea that let me make the money to do something else. Most of the people who you see there they would have, even in India today, are children who have joined, or youth who have joined colleges. And they would say, paper chut gaya, I haven't completed this paper, backlog is there, whatever, So this group of people is no different from the kids in America who are in the college.
Correct.
Except that here they come from a poorer section of population. There, everybody and anybody can do it. So this is a social status issue rather than this thing. So I think there the opportunity is full-scale skilling. That means they will look at additional educational qualification, additional skilling itself. Whereas a group of them will look at upskilling and reskilling on a consistent basis. Because job roles are changing at 3 to 5 years now. With technology coming in.
Actually, we're seeing it at 2 to 3 years now. We're seeing that especially in the IT sectors. In 2 to 3 years, roles are changing. Kids are looking at career progression, and to keep those kids, especially the bright ones, companies need to look at how to sustain that, and retain them. So that becomes important to them.
Right. So I think that's where the changes will happen.
Okay. So actually that because we've actually launched something called Pathfinder, which is primarily on career progression, because we believe, so far as a company, we were looking at what companies need, for employees, what are they doing, how do they recruit them, how do they optimize them. But we also realize we need to start looking at the people they have and what their aspirations are. So what you're saying kind of links in. But right now we are in the IT services space and banking. So we are hoping to move into the other verticals, maybe one day in construction and manufacturing, and see where we go from there. Is there anything else, Gayatri, you have to say to complement this on the...
Not really. I just think it's a decade which is going to see enormous halchal, we're going to see a lot of change which is happening. And possibly, 2040 will look nothing like 2020. Our entire way of working, learning, etc. will change. So and I do believe it's for the positive. The previous one didn't really benefit the poor so much. So according to me, you can only go up, right? You can't go down.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
if you can only go up, it's for the positive. I think if you look at 1970 to 2020, there's been a lot of change. Whenever you talk to anybody old, just anecdotal, they'll tell you, I don't see any more stark poverty, which is good. People say that, everywhere, everyone is enrolling children into schools, which is good. Access to the same goods, be it a TV or, if you look at the NSS, the National Sample Survey questionnaire in the 1990s and look at it now, there, if you owned a cycle, you were in the radio, you were rich. Whereas now you probably have TV and bike, which has come in there.
And a fridge, yeah.
So I think from that perspective, I think the biggest change is going to be in the knowledge economy. And knowledge economy, I'm broadening to say that everybody will fall under the knowledge economy. So it's not going to be one. So it's probably technology will change the way we work every day. So, a Swiggy delivery or Zomato delivery boy or girl today is digitally connected, is financially connected, lives in the world we live. Otherwise, there was a them versus us. So that has happened. So the next one will probably result in a far larger group coming into this. That I think is what will happen.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. It was such an interesting conversation. Thanks for your time. And we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Aparna.
Thank you. Oh my God, it says Aparna started recording now. Are you telling me our entire conversation didn't get recorded?
No, it showed the meeting is being recorded at that time also. I don't know.
Anyway, let me check. Anyway, thanks, Gayatri. Thank you.
How have you been?
All good. All good. Hectic, but good. I'm running between two houses, so I go a little crazy, but I'm good. My mother-in-law and all stay in Richmond Town. I stay in Jakur, so I go back and forth. Let's meet up sometime, yeah, for a cup of coffee or something. Now this Corona thing is. Are you open to meeting?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the road all the time.
Okay, so then that's fine. Yeah, okay. Let's meet up. I'll give you a call and let's meet up for coffee. When I come this side of town, I'll go.
Yeah, I think the only thing is, we run the coronavirus help desk. So I go to the hospitals a lot. So, unless you're comfortable.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't worry. If I'm not, I'll tell you I'm not comfortable at some point. So don't worry about it. I think both of us are direct enough. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.